Good morning and welcome to Heart Journey Home, the podcast for me just sharing all of my fascinating insights and those of amazing people I happen to meet along the way. I'm joined by Said. Am I getting that right?
Yep.
Fantastic. So you and I met online and discovered that of all the people you can, bump into online, we actually have a few common interests.
Mm.
Um, so tell me a bit more about what it is you do and how you got there.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it was a great conversation, right? That first conversation that we had, and it's funny, like I could just tell straight away, within like a few minutes. I was like, oh wow, I really like talking to this guy. Um, yeah, what do? I train people. I train volunteers in suicide prevention. So, um, how I got there, it's funny because when I first started, I just thought that it was because I wanted to help. I just wanted to help. I started as a volunteer in about 2016, and and then probably by about 2019 or so, I'd done enough learning, reflection, growth, etc., to recognize like, oh, of course I would wind up here doing this kind of work based on the type of experiences that I had growing up. But I just never connected those dots before that. It was like surprising to me to recognize like, oh, I have personal experience with suicide and now I work in suicide prevention. Seems like a very clear link, right? But yeah, just how it was.
I remember hearing once that it's the territory we win in our own lives campaigns that becomes the territory for our for the kingdoms we build later on.
Hmm. Yeah.
Mm. Um, Okay, great. Well, you and we were talking about a couple of things the other day. How about we
Hmm.
kind of go back
Sure.
to those conversations? Because I think one of the big ones that we were discussing was trauma and
Mm.
how that works. You've done a bit of study on trauma in your line of work. You've um, developed an understanding of it. How about you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Cheers. Okay. So uh, I guess firstly, I'll preface that this is not the study that I've done is just in my own time. It's not like academic study, right? So there's a lot of very big brains out there, people who have done a ton of study, and that's not my background, right? My background is that I have grown up and made sense of my own trauma, um, and then just found myself surrounded by other people who are similar, and we've just all figured it out together the hard
Mm,
way, basically, reading a lot of books and just experimenting in our own lives.
mm,
But yeah, so I guess my working model of what it is, I do think that it's like massively overused. The term is massively overused, but at the same time, it's massively under misunderstood. It's like very misunderstood. Um, so yeah, the working model that I have, basically, I think that our identity is kind of like a container, and I like to think of it like a clay pot, for example. And that clay pot is built out of the beliefs that we have about ourselves, about the world, about reality. It's basically our working version of reality. And what happens when we have a memory or an event that is so awful that our it doesn't fit the size of our container is that we shatter, our identity shatters, and in trying to reconcile reality against you know what how we think it should be or how we believe that it ought to be or whatnot or the system of beliefs that we hold that form our worldview. What happens is as that shatters, then in those cracks, that's where trauma appears.
mm,
It's absolutely an opportunity to all of these pains and all of these horrific experiences are opportunities to kind of formulate our identity to be able to encompass a wider experience. And yeah, and I guess I feel like we sort of get lost when we just don't have good enough storytelling for people to understand
Mm.
how horrific things can actually lead to, you know, beautiful characteristics. And yeah, so
I actually find that really fascinating. So it's almost as though storytelling is this cultural technology, and we've focused our attention in the Western world so much on other forms of technology
mm,
that we've lost this ancient art of storytelling. And we tell stories for entertainment in the West, but we don't think of telling stories for the purpose of internal cohesion, right? For
mm,
the purpose of maturity, for resilience, for identity. It's like, why not? Like my parents, when I was growing up, did not share stories about their lives and their childhoods, and it was very, very rare for them to even drop an anecdote that
mm,
gave me a sense that I existed within a larger context of stories.
mm,
You mentioned that uh, uh, people, you mentioned this notion of a container, and that when trauma happens, there are cracks that form around that container. Um, what exactly is it containing?
mm. I suppose it's containing the lens through which we perceive.
Mm,
You know? And I really like what you mentioned there about the sort of lack of anecdote that you had growing up. It's not like something like that. It's really small, you know. It's easy to walk past and not really. It doesn't seem super significant, right? The same way that a car accident might be or something. But what it means is, and I feel that it's similar for just most of us in the West. Um, I've got a little anecdote to sort of describe that. One of my favorite writers, Derek Sivers, talked about in an email. He talked about how he went to Dubai, and he had a lot of problems with that whole part of the world. He had a lot of problems. He had a lot of opinions. He had a lot of problems with that part of the world. And one day, someone challenged him and said, "Why don't you come visit? You can stay with me, and you'll see. Just." And so he did. He took him up on that challenge, and he went and visited. And this person was talking about his family, and he was talking about how his family used to make shoes, and he was sharing the story about like shoemaking and leatherwork and all these sorts of things. And after listening to this story for a while, Derek was like, wait, some of this is not quite adding up. You're talking about this guy, and he knows this dude's name. It's like Salman, whatever, um, this shoemaker, and he's like, wait, but did you say like this city here? And the guy's like, yep, that city. And he's like, wait, but when though? Like you're talking about him. It seems like the timeline that you're using is that you're talking about this guy as though he's your uncle. And the dude who was hosting him, he was like, yeah, it was 800 years ago. And Derek is like, what do you mean? You
mm,
know that what this guy was up to 800 years ago, that is in that was this one person in his
mm.
life. And so he came to understand that culturally and contextually, yeah, as far as like the history of storytelling, like it's just a completely different respect for that technology. um
That's
yeah.
right. And it is a technology in the sense that it's a way of doing something that if you're out of that context, if you don't learn those skills, you're not going to be nearly as effective at it. I remember I first thought about technology in this more broader way when I was studying teaching for a little while, and we talked about um, the use of homework. You know, when should you use it for what purposes? And the textbooks called it a technology. There was a time when homework was invented, and they found ways that it works and ways that it doesn't work, and how much is too much, and all that sort of thing. And storytelling is kind of the same way. It's something that you would typically learn in a social context, probably just by osmosis, you'd pick it up, but it may not have been explicitly taught. Well, in some contexts, you don't even pick it up. All the stories that you hear are on TV or now on your phone. That little slip shows my age if I'm talking about actual television. So this container that we all have our own container. That container sort of determines how we look out into the world. I'm assuming that it holds not only our way of perceiving, but that perception is filtered through our beliefs, our background, our culture, our relationships and experiences. And so when our experiences have been traumatic, it does something to the lens through which we're looking out into the world. Do you have anything to share about that part of how this works?
Yeah. So when I was 18, I had an experience where I came pretty close to ending my life, and as close as I've ever come. And what's really fascinating to me now, looking back, is that I remember very, very clearly that I was looking through. There was this moment where I was rolling through my memories, almost like scrolling. Right? We didn't have smartphones back then. But let me just relate it to everybody who's listening now. It's almost like I was scrolling through my memories, and what I distinctly remember is being totally unable to find one single memory where I felt loved. Couldn't find one. And I was looking and looking, and I just remember like thinking, what is happening? Like, surely I know that I've experienced laughter, like I know, like there was this voice in my mind that was rational and was like, I know that there's something wrong here. And it's almost like waking up and one part of me was suspicious that I was colorblind, while the rest of me was like trying to convince me that no, this is how it's always been. And this is how it always will be. So versus now, being able to see the difference between my perspective now and my perspective then, the wildest thing to me is that if I could talk to that person, if I could actually speak to the person who was there in that moment and couldn't find a single positive memory and couldn't find a single positive association, then I think the part that is so difficult for most people is that there's nothing that I can say of where I am now in 2025 that he could hear. That's the part that so many people really struggle with. They just think like, oh, you just got to chin up, like just you'll get through it. It's temporary, like whatever.
Lots of well-meaning people come alongside and try to give case studies and rational reasons why you are loved. Look at all these examples. And what you're saying is that what they don't grasp is that all that encouragement, all of that, normal dialogue that you would have with someone in a healthy state, it's not getting through to where that conviction is coming from.
Exactly. The state that I was in, I couldn't receive anything that I couldn't perceive. So what happened is that over time, I learned how to tell a better story about the cracks of my in my identity, and as that happened, what I developed a different character, and my perception started to be capable of courage. I remember really distinctly this period where I got obsessed with courage because I was like, oh my God, courage. Like, what is this thing that this is incredible. Like I recognized that I'd been missing it. And so I'd lived in this way of fear, and I'd lived in this way of just bending toward the group, the expectations of people around me, and bending toward the behaviors that didn't feel aligned. But I was doing these things that I didn't want. There's a part of me that was like, oh, this is not what I want to do. Meanwhile, all of my friends, I'm looking at them and I'm like, are you having fun? And they're like, yeah. Aren't you having fun? And I'm like, yeah, I guess, because I didn't have the courage to be actually real about who I was and what I wanted to stand for. But that became a really important part of that pot, of that clay pot. It was like, once I found courage, I could tell a different story. And so, yeah, now, so the thing is, if I could talk to that person who was back then, I would just listen to them. I would just listen to him. I think that's the hard part, is that, like, it's not about what I have to say. It's about what he has to say. That's the part where the important work can be done, where in terms of like those cracks, if there's someone empathic, if there's someone like compassionate and open who can, my partner calls it trustworthy people. If there's a trustworthy person, it means that they're not going to just try and fill all the cracks and be like, oh, you got to do this. Here's my super glue. Like, do all these things. That's not trustworthy, right? We're trying to be helpful, but that's not actually helpful.
So this notion of a trustworthy person, it makes me think about a concept I developed a year or two ago. There are so many models in psychology and religion and philosophy that reduce a person down to two essential elements. And I thought, well, what happened if you brought all those different models together, stacked them on top of each other, and used them to kind of inform one another? And you have to choose one way of representing them, and I went with heart and mind. Right? And my understanding was the mind represents that aspect of our being that has explicit conscious thoughts. It's directed by our will, in a lot of the time, not always. But it's this abstract, detached from the world, happening internally, kind of monologue type level of our being. The heart, however, is more associated with the body. It's happening in the present. The present is where relationships happen. It's where spontaneity happens. It's where authenticity happens. And it's in the moment, responding to the outside world, rather than being abstract, observing the outside world. And using that model, it seems like someone in the state that you're describing, their conscious monologue mind is completely flooded by something happening in their experience. And so if you're coming alongside someone like this and you're trying to speak to the mind, here are all the reasons. Let me explain it to you. Let me make a good case. That logical approach, it gets flooded like everything else. But what I hear you saying is, what you can give that person is an experience of trustworthy relationship. And that being a trustworthy person is not about having all the right things to say, and it's not about you're thinking about things wrong, I'm thinking about things right, think like I think. It's like, well, that bypasses the issue. This person's going through something, right? And you can't convince them out of it, because how do you convince someone against their own experience?
Exactly.
It's like gaslighting in a way.
It is, and that's why
it's the positive gaslighting.
Totally. And that's why that word is so overused, because that's the experience. That is like, culturally, as far as like the technology of storytelling, somewhere along the lines, we got addicted to this story of telling people things and not listening to things. not listening to
Mm.
them. We got addicted to this story of like the experience that you're having in your being and in your heart, for example, has no bearing on our relationship. And the only thing that matters is my mind to your mind. And it's like, it's just wild to me that
Mm.
how are we here? But yeah, I'm fascinated by it. I love the challenge. I'm here for it.
Mm.
So yeah.
There's a verse in the Bible that comes to mind. It says, "My people honor me with my people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me."
Hmm.
And that's again this dual register of how we're showing up. It's like, um, I think you're absolutely right. We've normalized this notion where when we come together, we're meeting head to head. We're not meeting heart to heart.
Mm.
And in the religious context that I grew up in, um, it seemed like that was the normal thing. You know, it's a Western cultural thing. It's saturated religion as much as anywhere else. Um, but when we show up, there is a lack of genuineness. There's a lack of spontaneity. There's no vulnerability because we've learned that showing up with just our heads means that our experience of people is safe. Our experience of one another and perhaps even the hearts that we carry that have been, you know, sustained various paper cuts over the years, we're going to keep that over here away from where anyone else can hurt us.
Mm.
And that's not even something we think. It's become an automatic process of us showing up. And what I've found in my own experience is that I needed to enter into the trauma healing journey in order to recover my full authenticity, you know, where it's not leading with the heart and your rational thoughts are in the back seat, and it's not leading with your rational thoughts and keeping your heart, you know, hidden away, but it's having both aligned together.
Mm.
And I think that's a real art, a real cultural technology that we need to recover.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. It's it's more like in the time of smartphones and instant connections. Um, it's critical. Like we have such easy access to bypass our experience and dive
Mm,
into our mind and dive into a world of like what even is that world of ideas and of like shadows and
mm,
addiction and instant gratification. Basically it's
mm.
instant gratification. Like, what's not instantly gratifying? Anything that the heart wants. Like anything that the heart actually deeply desires, it's not
Yeah.
instantly gratifying. You're gonna have to, it's uncomfortable. You're gonna have to have tough conversations. You're gonna have to put yourself out there, like
Mm-hmm.
take a risk.
So, in order to
Yeah.
cultivate a life that has things that the heart wants to be present for, you have to engage in this kind of hard, disciplined,
Mm.
intentional work to cultivate a life like that. And I think, like what you were describing before when you were hanging out with your friends, like, are you having fun? Yeah, I guess so. It's almost like we've fallen in as a culture, you know, we've grown up in this kind of complacency where our environment is doing all of that work to say, this is the story, this is where you're going, this is what's important.
Mm.
And we grow up in that and we just sort of ride along like a
Mm.
passenger until we reach a point where we think, you know what, this vehicle that I'm in isn't taking me where I want to go. I might have to get out and hitchhike. I might have to catch a bus and a boat, and like who knows how I'm going to get to where I'm going. But I just know that the longer I stay in this car, the further I'm getting from where I want to go.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's in terms of like I'm just going to keep coming back to that. I really like that idea of storytelling as a technology.
Mm,
Um, in terms of the technology of storytelling, it's almost like if we were to classify it as a whole like technology, for example, like infrastructure or like
mm,
agriculture. Technology of agriculture. It's like there's all different layers to that, right? There's like water management, and there's like pesticides, and there's natural systems, and all kinds of different ways, right? So if we were to classify like storytelling as technology, then where my mind goes is one type of story that's really missing is the story around cause and effect, like in a meaningful way. We tend to talk about it in this way that's very shallow. It's like, what happened on the news? This happened. And then people kind of emulate that level of thinking in their life, where it's like, can you believe this awful thing that happened? And for me, I'm like, what caused that to happen? You know, isn't that an interesting discussion to have? Like, isn't that a part of this discussion? But often it's not. It's just either it's too complex, or maybe it's too difficult. People might just not be wired that way in order to follow the thread and just chase it, and just chase the white rabbit until they learn more about the world. But for example, what you were talking about, where people are just kind of going along with this, like the world tells them, if you get a, you know, you study and then, you know, you get a good job and you buy a house, and then you get married and you have kids. And so many of us are like waking up to the reality that that's not how the economy is playing out. That's not how, you know, I know very few people who are really glad that they followed that path. And are just having difficult experiences, right? Figuring out the hard way that they have to tell a different story about their future. And really, as far as like the storytelling, like the technology, it's like we don't have this. There's a story that's missing of, where is it taking me? Where is my decision taking me? Where is my lifestyle taking me? Where is, like, what future am I heading toward? Yeah.
And it's part of this technology needs to be not only listening to stories, not only remembering stories, but I think what you're describing, it's connecting with the story and letting it become something that you can ruminate over, that you can interrogate, deconstruct, look at from different perspectives. Like, I think that's the notion of a parable or a koan. You know, these ancient stories that didn't give you a direct answer, but it was sort of a riddle or something cryptic, you know, and it's like that storytelling medium was a technology. We may not, you know, like archaeologists digging something up out of the dirt, we may not know why they designed it that way. But in hindsight, we look back and realize, oh, that's a right hemispheric technology, right? This isn't speaking to the logical mind. It's speaking to the heart.
Yeah.
That's where the story needs to go.
Yeah.
That's why it's so metaphorical and visual and vague. You know, that's the language of the heart. And we listen to it, and it's like, on first pass, if we're, you know, trying to meet it at our head level, we might instantly dismiss it and say, oh, that doesn't make sense. Or, yeah, that's a cute story, let's move on, right? But the wisdom of those stories, the technology, belongs to those who are willing to sit and wait with the story, to allow it to come into them and form part of their internal map building, right? It's interesting. It's interesting to reflect on how we really do have a lack of storying nowadays. You don't learn it growing up. And the stories we get are kind of just built for mass consumption, entertainment, even the news, God forbid. It's like a lot of bad news.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a terrible system.
The stories that we're exposed to become the building blocks of our worldview. That is the lens through which we perceive the world, through which we make judgments about what is the world like, what's important, what's true, What's the path that I need to follow when I'm confronted by unexpected obstacles?
Yep. You mentioned safety earlier. You mentioned the word safe. And I think we have designed through entertainment and media, we unlocked massive capacity. We unlocked massive capability for education and information sharing and all sorts of things. And we also have built a prison, a cultural prison, where storytelling has been shuffled into fit the framework through which we deliver it.
Mm.
So how, like what you mentioned about slow storytelling, about chewing on a story, like spending
Mm.
time with a good story,
Yeah.
sitting around a fire, camping. I don't know whether you go camping very often.
Not for a long
Do
time, but
you?
I have those
Yeah,
memories.
right. You have those memories, right? So those those are sort of the only times when these days people in our culture have that slow storytelling kind of
Mm.
experience where they do just you might just spend 3 hours with one idea sort of bouncing around because you had a
Mm.
conversation about it and you're not really doing much else. um, and
Mm.
then and it's that slowness where you can make those connections. And so but we've built these like super entertaining forms of technology where the storytelling has conformed to the technology. And now the technology of storytelling has suffered as a result and led us to this point where I feel that we just like the word safety. It really like I really struggle with safety. The concept that most people that I see it so often used, because safety is this real external. There's this implicit story that society has
Mm.
been telling that it is the society's job to keep you safe. And it's like that makes sense to me. That makes sense on a level of the external. It makes sense on a level of I'm grateful that police will prevent someone from killing me, for example, or that my government will offer healthcare. I'm very grateful for that.
Mm.
But the story has been warped so that it's now internal, where my internal sense of safety is society's responsibility. And I have to feel safe due to society making me feel safe. And it's
Mm.
like, this is a story that is such a tragedy for me that I feel um, that it's only internally that safety can be built. And
Mm.
yet we're expecting people to outsource to that role to
Mm.
people around them, to institutions around them. um, which to me, I'm like, what's the cause of that? Like, where's that kind of going? What's the effect
I mean,
um,
it probably
into
has
the
a
future?
number of it probably has a number of different sources, but the one that comes to mind for me is school. You go to
Mm,
school, this is an environment that's heavily curated. You've got people who are in charge of running it, and if things are not safe, who do you go to as the
mm.
ones who make it safe?
Yeah,
Right? You've got
totally.
teachers, you've got administrators, you've got parents calling in and saying,
Yeah,
"You need to make things safe for my child," right?
yeah,
And so the world that we grow up in, probably more and more these days, literally is the environment is responsible for my internal safety.
yeah,
And what I think what you're alluding to is that's a bad story to move into the world with. Because when you become a grown up, when you enter into society, there's a common courtesy that's nice to have, but ultimately your internal safety and your own internal well-being is your responsibility.
there's no authority that's real once you're out in the world. Out of school, there's no real authority who you can rely on outside of your own wit. So, and like here's the example of what I mean by that. I used to be a bouncer. One time I was on the door and someone ran up to me and said, "Oh my gosh, this awful thing happened." And they explained what happened. And they're like, "This happened and then that happened and then this happened. And this is what this person did." And I was like, "Okay, tell me, like, take me to them." Instantly I'm just ready to like confront them, either get them out of the club, immediately or whatever. At least investigate, right? So, and then the person looked at me and was like, "Oh, they're not here." And I'm like, "Okay, so back up. When did it happen?" And they were like, "About 45 minutes ago." And I'm like, "Okay, so this awful thing happened. I've been here for 45 minutes. You're telling me about this now." They left the club straight away. What do you expect me to do? Like, what? I'd really like to understand, like, what are you, mate? I can console you. That's awful that that happened. I'm sorry to hear that. uh I can offer you like empathy as a human, but as far as my role goes, the ship sailed for anything
Mm.
to be done. And I was really wondering about that. I was like, how does that happen? How does someone go through life and be like, "Oh my gosh, that's so like terrible and violent and awful," and not do anything to help themselves or their friends who they obviously care about very much, and just be kind of like in a stupor, I suppose. And
Mm.
that was it. I imagine that it comes down to how they were indoctrinated at school, how they were taught. It was like, when something bad happens, an authority will swoop in and everything will be okay after that, because the authority is there, they have your back, and you go and tell the teacher. But it's like, who do you tell after that? You have your, it's you, it's up
Mm.
to you. So that was a really ugly one for me to learn in my 20s. That was
Yeah.
really, really ugly. Um and after I came out the other side, that kind of what I found deep in my heart. One time I was sitting there and I was like, I was really close to ending my life, like I told you earlier. And I was like, I'll just see about tomorrow, how I feel tomorrow. Right? I'll just see,
Mm.
because what if I'm wrong? There's a part of me that's like still skeptical that maybe I'm wrong about the world, and maybe the world, it's cold and heartless and lonely, and maybe I'm wrong. And I was sitting there and the sun came up, and it struck me that, like, I get to make the world warm.
Mm.
It is cold, right? The world is cold. So what, that I get to do something about that. The world is dark. Like, the universe is dark. I get to do something about that. And that was like, I think that that is, in terms of the experience, I suppose you could say that that was one of those cracks getting filled, um,
Mm.
in that moment. And and I and so ever since then I've had that. But I suppose the hard part for me is, it's like, if I could wave a magic wand, then we would have stories to give people that pathway for themselves, normally, commonly, so that, like what you're saying, they can leave school and build their own self efficacy, or like self
Mm.
agency. And yeah, I feel like, as far like, there's this story about safety that I'm really concerned about, where it's taking people. Yeah.
There's in my first year studying counseling, I I realized that a lot of the people I was reading about, a lot of the people I was meeting, who had issues that you'd bring to a counselor, it was almost as though the world they inhabited was a maze, and they were struggling to navigate through this maze. But the maze that they had did not have a gate to the outside.
Mm,
It only sent them round in circles.
yeah.
And the more that you try to solve a maze that has no ultimate solution, you'll just exhaust yourself moving through it. And I realized that part of my job as a counselor is to help people not solve the maze, but but change what the maze is so that there are pathways out.
Mm.
And I think that's what we're describing with storying as a technology. It's like we're sort of handed these stories, we're handed these artificial experiences that frame our lives in such a way that we become what you were describing as a bouncer. It sounds like this person was a bystander. It was like the bystander effect, but like for your own life.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
and it's like, if we don't have the models, it's like we learn maths in school, where we learn a number of frameworks that help us solve problems, right? If you're confronted with any complex mathematical problem, there's a solution for it, right?
Yeah.
But what if that is in fact the principle when it comes to life, but instead of like mathematical equations, we have stories that provide different ways of seeing, different ways of perceiving, that might help us jailbreak out of this closed maze.
Yeah. I love that. I love that so much. Jailbreak out of this closed maze. I was talking with my partner last night. We had this really weird fight. It was the silliest, most abstract fight. It's just so silly. And I remember afterwards I was chatting with her and I was like, babe, I was trying to help you. And I used the word prison. I was trying to help you. I was trying to describe the prison that I was in. And I could tell, because I felt my pride was rubbed. My pride was like, I was like in this prison of my own pride, where she was trying to give me a compliment. And I was like, how dare you? It was so silly. It was so dumb. And my ego was just so like, I was like, oh, just this like, I have this image that I really like, that I share with some people that we mentor. And when I'm like, I get into this mode where I'm like a panda protecting its trash, like a trash panda, sorry. Like a raccoon, just protecting its pile. And it's like, don't come near my trash. Like this trash is so important to me. And so when I'm like I'm trying to protect my ego. I'm trying to defend myself, and I don't want to change. I don't want to accept anyone else's perspective. But yeah, she was talking and I got like butthurt about something, and I was sharing about afterwards, we were sort of unpacking it, and I was sharing about how like I could tell that I didn't even believe my own words. I was like, this is confused. I'm like, oh, that hurts me. I was like, and there was a part of me that I could tell. And I was trying to give the language so that I was like, I'm in prison. Can you see like this shaped kind of doorway? Like, and I was trying to help her to help me to get out of my own fragile male ego. Basically, it was so funny.
But that's a really interesting like experience that you became like aware or semi-aware of. It's like, I'm in the midst of an argument right now, in the present. This is my heart speaking. But then I become aware, my head looking at what I'm saying, and it's like, I don't believe this. But you keep talking. I had that experience. I had that experience like 2 years ago or a year and a half ago. And what I realized was, it's like I'm talking, and I'm like, why am I talking? And I realized what I'm saying isn't because it's true. Even as convincingly and logical as it might sound. And I'd done a lot of research to back up what I was saying, right? So it was a very strong argument. But what I realized was, I'm not saying it because it's true. I'm saying it because it's justifying how I feel, right? It's explaining, this is how I feel. It's justifying I feel this way. But it's a story that traps me in that feeling.
In that prison.
That's right. So the more that I aligned myself with that story, that way of thinking, those beliefs, those arguments and assertions, it's almost as though I'm saying, like, this is my trash. Or it's like saying, no, this is my maze. I'm going to solve this maze, and I'm going to do it by walking around in circles endlessly. And it's like, but it won't be solved that way. You know, if the story I'd been telling for 10 years, if that was the way out, I would have been out by now.
100%. It takes self-awareness and humility. There's a deep level of humility to recognize that someone else can help. And for me, I never knew that a part of the structure of my prison growing up was my arrogance. I thought that, like, I just didn't know that I was arrogant. I genuinely just had no idea that I was arrogant. And I remember I started getting that feedback a few different times from a few different places. And then eventually I was like, oh, well, I mean, if everyone keeps telling me I'm wearing a shirt, I guess I'll just wear it. Whatever. That sounds like a them problem. And now looking at that, I'm like, oh, wow, what an arrogant way to respond to being told that you're arrogant. That was just so funny. But when what I had to learn was that without other people's insight, I'm going to be stuck with the same results that I've always had. I'm going to be stuck. The same thinking that's always gotten me what I've always had is going to continue to get me what I've always got. So I need to actually embrace other people's perspectives and learn how to shut down tune out what my own thoughts and listen deeply into what someone else is trying to tell me about myself or about the world or about the maze or good stories that might help me find some light, out there and find a door.
But this is the hard part I think it takes to solve, to work through this when you've not done it before. The hard part is realizing this. The thoughts that I think and the words that I say and the story I'm telling may not actually be coming from my mind.
Yeah.
My conscious mind that has free will. Yep. It may actually be coming from my heart.
Yep.
And more than that, the wounds of my heart.
Yep.
And so the wounds of my heart and the character that arises out of those wounds, with its beliefs, with its perceptions, it floods my mind, and now no one can correct me. There is no logical conversation to have, because it's my experience, it's my heart that needs to change, and no one else can change it for me.
Yeah, brilliantly put. And that's what if we have a culture, if we have a culture addicted to escaping the heart and what the heart wants and what the heart needs, then how are we going to be able to heal it? And even acknowledging that there's healing that needs to be done is really a difficult pill to swallow, that to recognize, like, wait a second, this trash mountain that I've been protecting isn't actually a pile of treasure. Like, what are you talking about? Like, this is mine, like, I fought so hard to build up my pile. I'm the king of this pile. But yeah, no, turns out that it's probably trash. It's just,
well, it seems like part of what apart from the technology and the culture that manifests in ways that say, here's how you can avoid your heart entirely. Right? There's a lot of that going on. But I think it's what you said before. It's like there needs to be a great deal of humility for us to come back to our hearts and admit, you know what? I know I'm expected to be this grown-up who's got everything together and who knows what he's doing, but there's this deeper part of me that I've put on a shelf, but it won't stay there. And it needs reparenting. It needs to be taken care of and, like, have its needs met. I don't know how to do that, because even that is not something I was given stories about.
Yeah. And I suppose one thing that I will say about the lockdowns through COVID that I was really surprised by is the amount of help seeking skyrocketed, and the number of people who suicided stayed roughly the same. That really surprised me. And I think that, to me, that I'm an optimist, and I think that's how I've filled one of those cracks in
Mm,
my own life, is to look for that perspective and to find, okay, so all right, these are things that are awful. These are stories that are being told. This is how the news is doing terrible things. This is how the media is doing terrible things. But behind every single one of those problems is a challenge that can, if you can overcome that in your life, be an
mm,
opportunity to back into the heart, basically.
mm. The heart being the last place we want to be because that's where we keep all our traumas.
Yeah.
But it's also where all the things of life like spring from, right? It's where relationships happen. It's where joy and love happen.
Yeah.
But it's also where trauma happens. And so because of that, we want to stay as far away from our hearts as possible, just implicitly.
Yeah.
Saeed, it's been a pleasure chatting with you again.
Yeah. Thank
We
you. Thank you so
we'll,
much.
we don't have time to continue at the moment, but I'd love to do a part 2 sometime. This has
Great.
been fantastic.
Yeah, totally. Thank you so
Mm.
much, Andrew. It's been really fun.
All right, cool. I'll see you later.
Cool. Bye.
Bye.